Good evening, my friends. My name is Adam, and I will be your host on A Haunted History, the podcast that will lead you on a spine-tingling journey through the shadowy corridors of the past. From the eerie echoes of ancient castles to the whispered secrets of forgotten battlefields. Each episode will transport you to a different era where history and the supernatural collide. So dim the lights, my friends, and gather round as we prepare to embark on a historical adventure beyond the veil. Welcome once again to A Haunted History. Hi, guys. Welcome again to A Haunted History podcast. I'm sitting here with my younger brother, Kyle, and we're going to talk a little bit about college hauntings today. And Kyle, you went to school in Athens, correct?
Yes, Ohio University.
Okay. Did you ever have any experiences? I know that you guys had a mental institution or an asylum. I'm sorry, mental institution sounds bad, but an asylum on the property?
Yeah, it was, let's see here. It opened in 1874 and it was for like Civil War soldiers and women with hysteria and other like mentally ill. But yeah, it was renamed. It was actually, it wasn't the Ridges when it opened. It was renamed in 1984.
Okay. So I've been through there with you when you went to school there in Athens, and it is a very creepy place. It's one of the few places that I've actually been so uncomfortable that I wanted to get out of there, even in midday. And I know there's been a lot of supernatural occurrences around that particular building as well as your campus. Uh, Have you had anything happen to yourself or your friends?
Not me really personally. Just like other than like weird feelings and feeling like I was like seeing shadows move that weren't really there. But we actually used to break in there at night every now and then for fun. But and there's this legend, not legend actually. It actually happened in December of 1978. This patient named Margaret Schilling, she was playing hide and seek with some nurses and some other patients, and the nurses got distracted and forgot to look for her. She wasn't found until 6 weeks later, locked in a seldom used building. But the story goes that the guards could still hear her feet slapping as they're running barefoot down the halls and hear her laughing. But when she was found, there is an actual clear imprint of her hair and dress on the floor that is still there today, supposedly. There's a connecting story of a girl who broke in to see if it was true, found the imprint, touched it, and then was supposedly tormented by spirits or whatever, until she dropped out of the school.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'd heard about that. There's that, I guess it's the white lime imprint from the body. I think I had heard about that urban legend. If it's not a legend, it's fact that it happened, and that imprint's still there. So you had mentioned before that you had friends that had touched the gravestones. I know they had a lot of unmarked gravestones out back. Is that correct?
Yes, there's actually 3 separate graveyards that are like back in the woods and right outside. There's no names on any of them. They're all numbers because you basically became property of the state when you were admitted back then. So, but yeah, and there are unmarked graves. There actually is a graveyard where the gravestones form a circle, and supposedly that's where witches would gather.
Yeah, back then I believe it was kind of these kind of institutions, these asylums, so to speak. They were a great place to put your relatives that you didn't want to deal with anymore. It didn't actually mean that you had any kind of infirmity that made you a danger. It was just if they didn't like you, they could say whatever they wanted and have you locked away and just forget about you.
Yeah. And the Ridges, actually, they were eventually shut down for unethical treatment, such as forced labor, electroshock, hydrotherapy, hysterectomies, the use of psychotropic drugs, and like they even performed lobotomies.
No, in many ways, I mean, a lot of those treatments were experimental at the time, and I mean, they were doing what they could to try to help. Some of them are just downright sadistic, and they might have been performed by sadistic people. So yeah, it came to that point. Was that around the 1980s that it was shut down?
It was actually shut down in '93 because allegedly due to all the horrible deaths that occurred to patients in there.
No, I remember we had spoken. This has been a while back, but that the rumor was that a lot of the homeless that walked through Athens were actually former patients, that they really didn't contact relatives, that they just kind of threw open the doors and let people out.
That was always kind of said around campus. I never met any of the homeless people that were supposedly former patients. I'm not sure how true that was. Um, I mean, there definitely are some strange people that walk around that town.
Now, I remember walking through the ridges and going to the courtyard when they used to let the patients out, I guess, for exercise, and seeing the scratch marks from people trying to claw their way up the walls and try to escape, and that was very, very unnerving for me to see that.
Yeah, that was actually the first year that they were allowing public to the inner courtyard. That's where they would release the more sensitive and frantic. I guess I don't know if frantic is the right word, but um, easily agitated patients out for exercise. There were also supposedly tunnels under there, underneath the ridges, but I never was able to locate them, nor would I go in them if I had.
Now, I remember when we went on a campus tour with you when I was visiting, and there was a mention about a room they wouldn't let anybody stay in anymore that had some activity.
Yeah, that was Wilson Hall, and the room was originally in number 428. And um, in the 70s, there was a girl that stayed there and supposedly was performing like witchcraft or some kind of ritual or something, and would astral project her. That's what was said. Um, and no one had apparently seen her for a few days, so they got the RA to open the door, and she was in there, and she was tied down with like supposedly satanic symbols carved into her body. But thereafter, numerous people that stayed in that room supposedly lost their minds and or attempted suicide afterwards. And they even changed the numbers on the door, and no one, they no longer use it as a dorm room.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't want to stay in, Captain Creepy's room either. I mean, if something
No,
of that nature actually happened in that room and you were told you were getting that room, I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable in that.
right,
Not at all.
right. Yeah, I'm pretty
Um,
sure now it's just a storage closet, but they changed the numbers so people don't know which room it was.
yeah, which, I mean, did they change it prior to try to get people comfortable living in it, or did they change it so they wouldn't have so many people snooping around?
So they wouldn't have so many people snooping around, I think.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, I heard a lot I mean, with the Ridges itself, I mean, I heard that it is obviously a giant attraction for many students when they get bored and want to check something spooky out. I mean, obviously it's a giant beacon. So,
Yeah.
especially with the crematorium and everything in back. I mean, I just remember it looked very peaceful from the outside, but I was not comfortable on the inside.
Yeah, well, supposedly when it opened, before it was renamed the Ridges, it was described as a very like peaceful place, where there's like, just very soothing and very little anxiety. But then, you know, as it does happen, in the 80s, it started being, the population started increasing and care started to decline, and
Hmm.
it just it became apparently a horrible place.
I mean, it's always one of those things you hear about, not necessarily with, these institutions, but I mean, ooh, Shady Pine Sanatorium. Like, it's like they try to make it sound nice, but
Yeah.
and when it comes down to it, it's not. But I know that Athens had its fair share of hauntings, and with the college itself.
Yeah. Apparently in the Brown House, there's reports of the sound of children splashing around in a long gone pool. Washington Hall, which actually has like a bridge over a walkway. Uh, Supposedly there was a women's basketball team that used to stay there, and their bus crashed and killed the entire team. And you can apparently they returned to the dorm they enjoyed so much, and you can apparently hear uh, basketballs bouncing in the hallway at night.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned the pool being long gone and the splashes there. That has been something that has been long reported. I mean, whether it's the Queen Mary, which is I believe still docked in San Diego or not, and has activity around now empty pool there, and wet footprints appearing. For some strange reason, water seems to be still a very giant attractor, especially when it comes to pools. So I find that interesting.
Absolutely, and actually, um, there's another haunt, I guess you could say, around Wilson Hall, where they say it was actually built on a field that was a native Indian burial ground. And people will say they can still hear like Native Americans chanting and the sound of a river running through the land that no longer exists. Wilson Hall was actually featured on Scariest Places on Earth in an episode called Satan's Dormitory.
It's kind of funny. I was actually rewatching that. I believe that's like back from like the Discovery Channel or Travel Channel from like 2008, 2009. But like I've started rewatching those just out of kicks. But yeah, so yeah, I mean that was your experience there, and that school has a lot of a lot of pent up paranormal activity, it seems.
Yeah, apparently.
Now, I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia, Mizzou, founded in 1839. It was the oldest, well, I'm sorry, yes, it was the first public university west of the Mississippi and the first journalism school. And it, of course, has its share of stories itself. Some actually take place in my personal fraternity, and some take place in um, not a rival fraternity, but another fraternity on campus that I heard about. So I'm going to start with the other fraternity. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to do that. But during the Civil War, obviously the Union Army did occupy for a short bit of time the University of Missouri Columbia. The original academic hall before it burnt down. They actually garrisoned troops there. They had tents set up all over campus. So it is rumored that a lot of the buildings on campus, including a lot of the homes around the area, were used as military hospitals. Now, this particular fraternity says that their residence was used as a military hospital, and as hospitals go, they hold a lot of emotion and a lot of energy itself. So they said to me, this is years ago when I was speaking with them about this, that they used to bury the bodies within the dirt floors of their basement, and also that they would incinerate the bodies in the boiler during this time. So I don't know if this actually happened once or if this was actually a tradition that they held on a regular, but they like to tell a story about a pledge class that they sent down there the night before their initiation, and they would lock the door with this pledge class and make them stay down there throughout the night. And they sent the pledge educator, who was already an active brother, down there with them, just to make sure they were okay, safe, everything was going okay. But in this particular case, the next morning, as the story goes, when they unlocked the doors, everybody marched upstairs, packed up their things without a word, and left the campus. I don't know if they left the university or if they left the fraternity, but they never spoke of it. So that in itself is kind of telling and very, very, very creepy. I myself lived in a fraternity that is at the intersection of Providence and Rollins. Now, I'm not going to give the name, but anybody hearing this that went to Mizzou, that is a member of this fraternity is kind of going to pick up on these things. So, Rollins Street is actually named after the owner of the old plantation house in which my fraternity occupied, called the Grasslands. And Mr. Rollins was known to have died on the property. They think he drowned in one of the ponds. So that was one of the first deaths that was reported on the property. Another death happened in 1910, but it wasn't a fraternity member from my fraternity, which was on the university's campus a year after the campus's founding in 1840. But it was not a member of my fraternity, but a different fraternity. He ended up killing himself in what would be my bedroom. And it at the time was the library, which was a huge room with huge vaulted ceilings. They ended up dividing it into two separate rooms. Nobody knows why he shot himself. We just know that it happened. But the most famous death that happened connected with the property concerned something that supposedly happened in the 1950s, where a little girl was hit while chasing a ball crossing the street where Rollins and Providence do stand now. There was no stop light or stop sign there at the time, and then taken and died on our lawn. So she is the most prominent spirit, and people have reported hearing her bounce her ball in the sunken garden outside the house itself. Now, my experience with this was one night I was sleeping in my bunk, and keep in mind, like I said, these bunks are huge vaulted ceilings. They're actually anchored to the ceiling itself, so they're not. It's not set up so that you can easily get up or down. In fact, I didn't have a permanent ladder. Sometimes I would actually have to swing over onto the wall and grab that ladder and climb down. I don't know what time of night it was, but I do remember feeling something kneel down on me. And you can distinctly feel when something small kneels down on you. So I ripped the covers off my head and I looked. And as I looked, I did not see anything there, but a glimpse of what I thought looked like a little girl. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I got down. I went down to put my shoes on to go to class, and one of my fraternity brothers said, "You saw her too." And at that point, we got our third fraternity brother and roommate involved in this, and he stated that he used to stay in the house over Christmas holidays. You're allowed to do that.
Okay.
And he was alone. Like, well, sometimes you might get one or two people. This time, he was by himself. Didn't think anything of it. And as he was in his bedroom with his door locked, he said that he felt something tug at his sheets. So instinctively, he pulls the sheets up tighter over himself and just tries to go to sleep, thinking it's his mind playing tricks on him. Well, at that point, the sheets were completely ripped off of him. Well, as he looked around in the darkness, nobody and nothing was there. He refused to this day to actually stay in the house by himself. So, the hauntings, like the house even creeped me out back when I was a pledge and I used to live in what they called the new pledge wing at the time. Just walking to the restroom at night was kind of an outer, like, out of body experience. You really didn't want to leave your room. And you unlocked that door and you got down there and did what you had to do and got back as fast as possible. So there was just something creepy about that hallway. But now I know, and I think that he kind of felt the same way, which is why he didn't stay there. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Kyle? Do you think that that these universities, I mean, you get a lot of these places that are really old. Do you think they collect this psychokinetic energy and this stuff? And
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. I could easily understand that being the case with all the old buildings and like the history that comes with them. A lot of these are these universities have been established for, quite a long time, so you're bound to get stories and things that have happened on these properties.
yeah, I think, I mean, we both went to school at Lindenwood University for a short period of time in St. Charles, Missouri, and I know that there were ghost stories that were abound connected with that university as well. I'm not as too familiar with them, and I did not have any experiences with them because I was a commuter at the time, just going for my master's. But yeah, I know that, and that university used to be a girls' school before it was ever founded as a co-ed college. So, yeah.
Yeah, I personally don't know a lot of the stories there, but I just know that, I mean, if you think about an old college that has tunnels underneath the campus,
Yeah.
I mean, back when it was an all-girls school, they created those tunnels so they wouldn't have to step outside in the winter and walk in the snow. But all I know is those have been closed off, and you can actually, it's an instant expulsion if you actually break into them.
Really?
Yeah.
They would expel you if they found you breaking into the tunnels.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're probably not the safest thing in the world.
No, by this time.
That would just being creepy. Well, everyone, I think this wraps up to the end of our show. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of A Haunted History, where we covered kind of a little bit of personal experiences involving college campus hauntings. Thank you once again for listening to our show. As always, your feedback is very important to us. So if you'd like to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and comment on there if you have any questions, it just makes our show better. Also, if you'd like to reach out to us personally with a comment or question, or maybe a supernatural story which you would like featured on the show, you can do so at contact@ahauntedhistory.com. Thank you once again, and have a good evening.